Hook, the crystal wine glass, slipped from her fingers. Deep crimson wine splashed across the perfectly tailored black suit of the most feared man in Seoul. The entire restaurant froze. A violinist stopped playing. A waiter nearly dropped a tray of champagne. The soft conversations that had filled the luxurious dining room disappeared into complete silence. No one dared move, because the man standing before her wasn't just another billionaire. He was Kang Min-jae, chairman of Korea's largest investment empire, and, according to whispers no newspaper would ever print, the ruthless mafia boss who controlled an underground empire stretching far beyond Seoul. People claimed politicians feared him. Business tycoons obeyed him. His enemies simply vanished. Whether those stories were true didn't matter. Everyone believed them. Within seconds, 6 bodyguards surrounded the young woman. Their hands disappeared beneath their jackets. One command, and she would never leave the restaurant alive. The guests lowered their heads. Some quietly reached for their phones before thinking better of it. Even the restaurant manager looked as though he was about to faint. Someone whispered, "She's dead." Another replied, "Nobody humiliates Kang Min-jae." Yet the woman didn't panic. She didn't run. She didn't even apologize. Instead, she calmly looked into his eyes, almost as if this was exactly what she wanted. A single drop of red wine rolled from his expensive suit onto the polished marble floor. The bodyguards waited for his order. 10 long seconds passed. Then 20. No one breathed. Finally, the woman broke the silence. "So, are you finally going to look at me?" The question stunned everyone. This wasn't a frightened voice of someone begging for forgiveness. It sounded like someone who had been waiting years to ask those exact words. Kang Min-jae studied her face. His cold expression never changed, until his eyes stopped, just for a fraction of a second. Recognition. Impossible recognition. The dangerous billionaire took one slow step closer, close enough that only she could hear him. Then, in a calm whisper that sent chills down her spine, he said, "I've been looking for you." Her heartbeat stopped, because those weren't the words she expected. Not after everything she had done. Not after spending 3 years planning this single moment. She came here to destroy the most powerful man in Korea. She never imagined he had been searching for her first. Part 1. 3 years earlier. 3 years earlier, Han Soo-jin believed her life was finally beginning. At 26, she had everything she had worked for since graduating from university. A promising career as a financial analyst, a small apartment overlooking the Han River, and a father who never missed an opportunity to remind her how proud he was. Success isn't about how much money you make. Her father often told her. It's about being able to sleep peacefully at night. She had always believed him. Her father, Han Dae-sik, wasn't rich. He worked as a chief accountant for Myri Holdings, one of Seoul's fastest-growing investment companies. He lived simply, drove a 12-year-old sedan, and still wore the same old wristwatch her late mother had given him. He was the kind of man who returned extra change when a cashier made a mistake. The kind of man who believed honesty always won in the end. Soo-jin admired him more than anyone. Every Friday evening, they met at the same neighborhood restaurant. They laughed over bowls of hot kimchi stew. He listened patiently as she talked about impossible deadlines, difficult clients, and dreams of one day opening her own financial consulting firm. "You'll build something bigger than I ever could," he would say with a smile. She always laughed. "You've been saying that since I was 15. Because it's true." Life was ordinary, peaceful, beautiful, until one rainy Thursday. Her father never came to dinner. At first, she assumed he had been delayed at work. She called him once. No answer. Twice. Still nothing. By the 10th call, a knot had formed in her stomach. Then her phone rang. An unfamiliar number. "Is this Ms. Han Soo-jin?" "Yes. I'm calling from Seoul Central Hospital." Everything after those words became a blur. She remembered racing through the rain. She remembered her shoes slipping on the hospital floor. She remembered the doctor's face before she remembered his voice. "I'm sorry. We did everything we could." Her father had been found unconscious in the underground parking garage of Myri Holdings. Official cause of death: a heart attack. The police closed the case within 24 hours. Natural causes. Nothing suspicious. Everyone told her to accept it. Everyone except her father's oldest friend. 3 days after the funeral, an elderly man quietly approached her. He looked over his shoulder twice before speaking. "Your father didn't die of a heart attack." Sue Jean stared at him. "What are you talking about?" The old man reached into his coat and handed her a sealed brown envelope. His hands were shaking. He knew something. "What?" "I don't know. But 2 weeks before he died, he told me if anything ever happened to him, I should give this to you." Before she could ask another question, the man turned and walked away into the crowd of mourners. She stood there in silence. The envelope suddenly felt heavier than it should, much heavier, as though it carried the weight of answers she wasn't ready to hear. That night, alone in her apartment, she finally opened it. Inside was a flash drive and a handwritten note in her father's careful handwriting. It contained only one sentence. "If you're reading this, trust no one, especially Kong Min-jae." Part 2. The name she couldn't escape. Sue Jean stared at the note for what felt like hours. Her father's handwriting was unmistakable. Every letter was carefully formed, just as it had been on the birthday cards he wrote every year. There was no doubt he had written it himself. Her hands trembled as she picked up the flash drive. "What did you find, Dad?" she whispered. She inserted it into her laptop. For a moment, nothing. Then a single encrypted folder appeared. Its name was simple: Insurance. The folder required a password. She tried her birthday. Access denied. Her father's birthday. Denied. Her late mother's name. Denied. She sat back in frustration. Her father had expected someone else might find the flash drive. He had protected it carefully. As she closed the laptop, something caught her eye: the back of the handwritten note. There, written in tiny letters she had almost missed, was another sentence. "The password is where we first became a family." Her heart tightened. She didn't need to think. The orphanage. She and her father weren't related by blood. He had adopted her when she was 6 years old after volunteering at a children's home outside Seoul. He never hid the truth. Instead, he always told her, family isn't built by blood. It's built by choice. She typed the name of the orphanage. The folder opened. Inside were dozens of files. Bank statements, confidential contracts, wire transfer records, private emails, photographs of meetings held late at night. Some involved politicians. Others involved executives from powerful corporations. Several documents showed enormous sums of money disappearing through shell companies before quietly returning as foreign investments. It was a sophisticated laundering network. Not millions, billions. Her breathing became shallow. "What is this?" Then she found a video. It had been recorded secretly inside what looked like a boardroom. The image was shaky. The sound was poor. Several executives were arguing. One voice stood above the others. "If Han Dae-sik refuses to sign, he becomes a problem." Another voice answered, then removed the problem. The video ended abruptly. No faces, only voices. Sue Jean replayed again, and again. The second voice. It sounded strangely familiar. She searched through the remaining files until she found one marked Project Raven. It contained only a list of names. Some had already been crossed out. Beside every crossed-out name was one word: closed. Near the bottom, she found her father's name, Han Dae-sik. The word beside it had also been written: closed. Her stomach turned. Her father's death had never been natural. Someone had erased him. But the final name on the list shocked her even more: Han Soo-jin. Unlike the others, her name wasn't crossed out. Not yet. A cold chill ran through her entire body. Someone wasn't finished. Someone knew she existed. Someone expected to come for her next. At that exact moment, a car stopped outside her apartment building. 3 men in black suits stepped out. One looked up directly toward her window. Then, her apartment doorbell rang. Part 3. The men at the door. The doorbell rang again. Once, twice, then a third time, not impatiently. Deliberately. Sue Jean's heart pounded so hard she could hear in her ears. She instinctively stepped away from the window, careful not to let her silhouette appear through the curtains. Another ring. Then came a calm male voice from the hallway. "Ms. Han, we're from Myrie Holdings. We just want to ask you a few questions about your father's belongings." She didn't answer. Her eyes drifted back to the laptop, the flash drive, the files, the list with her own name on it. They hadn't come for questions. They had come for the evidence. The man outside waited a few seconds before speaking again. "We know you're home." A cold wave rushed through her body. How? She had parked her car 2 streets away after returning from the funeral. The lights in the apartment were off. She hadn't made a sound. Then she remembered. The security camera in the hallway. Someone in the building must have informed them she had arrived. The voice outside became firmer. "Ms. Han, if you don't open the door, we'll have to assume you're hiding something." Her breathing grew shallow. She silently unplugged the flash drive from the laptop and slipped it into the lining of her handbag. The documents she quickly transferred into an encrypted cloud account, just in case. Another knock, this time harder. Boom, boom, boom. Her apartment suddenly felt very small. She looked toward the kitchen. No back door, only a narrow balcony, 6 floors above the street. No escape. Then her phone vibrated. An unknown number. She hesitated. It rang again. She answered in a whisper. "Hello?" A deep male voice replied immediately. "Don't open the door." She froze. "Who is this?" "They're not from Myrie Holdings." "I know. They're here to erase you." Every muscle in her body tightened. "How do you know that?" "I don't have time to explain. Listen carefully." His voice remained calm, almost unnervingly so. "Go to your bathroom. Now." Outside, another violent bang shook the apartment door. The man had stopped pretending. The lock rattled. "They're breaking in," she whispered. "I know." "Bathroom. Close the door." She ran. The pounding echoed through the apartment. She locked herself inside the tiny bathroom, pressing both hands over her mouth to stop herself from crying. The mysterious caller continued. "Look behind the mirror." She frowned. "What?" "The medicine cabinet." She pulled it open. Behind it, there was a narrow maintenance panel she had never noticed before. "Open it." Her fingers trembled as she removed the loose screws. Inside was a small emergency ladder, leading into the building's service shaft. She stared in disbelief. "How? How do you know this is here?" The man ignored the question. "Climb down 3 floors. There will be an unlocked maintenance door. Leave through the underground parking garage." The apartment door exploded open. With splintered, heavy footsteps thundered across her living room. "They're inside," she gasped. "I know. Go." She climbed into the narrow shaft just as voices echoed through her apartment. "Search every room. Find the flash drive." Her heart nearly stopped. They knew exactly what they were looking for. She quietly pulled the panel back into place. Darkness surrounded her. The only light came from the flashlight on her phone. As she climbed down the metal ladder, she whispered into the phone, "Who are you?" For the first time, the man hesitated. Then he answered with words that made no sense. "I'm the reason your father trusted no one, especially Kong Min-jae." Part 4. The Stranger in the Shadows. Soo-jin nearly lost her grip on the ladder. "What did you just say?" No answer. Only the sound of steady breathing on the other end of the line. Above her, muffled voices echoed through the walls. She couldn't have disappeared. Search the building. Check the security cameras. She forced herself to keep climbing, one careful step after another. The metal ladder creaked beneath her weight, each sound seeming loud enough to reveal her hiding place. 3 floors down, just as the caller had promised, she found a narrow maintenance door. She pushed it open. It led into the underground parking garage. The space was dimly lit and almost empty. A few luxury sedans sat parked between concrete pillars. She looked around cautiously. "Where do I go now?" she whispered into the phone. "Walk to column B12. She frowned. How could he possibly know where she was? Nevertheless, she hurried through the garage, counting the painted numbers on each concrete pillar. B7, B8, B9. Her pulse quickened. B10, B11. Finally, B12. A black luxury sedan waited there with its headlights off. The rear passenger door slowly opened. No driver stepped out. No one spoke. The mysterious voice on the phone said only one sentence. "Get in." Every instinct told her not to. Her father had warned her to trust no one. Yet staying in the garage was an option. The men upstairs would eventually search every floor. She tightened her grip on her handbag, making sure the flash drive was still hidden inside. Then she climbed into the back seat. The door closed automatically. The phone call ended. The partition between the front and rear seats was tinted black. She couldn't see the driver. The engine started. Without a word, the sedan rolled silently out of the parking garage and into the rainy Seoul night. For nearly 20 minutes, no one spoke. The windshield wipers swept rhythmically across the glass. Rain streaked the city lights into long ribbons of gold and blue. Finally, Soo-jin broke the silence. "Who are you?" The driver didn't answer immediately. Instead, he handed a sealed envelope through the opening in the partition. "Open it." Inside were photographs. Dozens of them. She flipped through them one by one. The first showed her father leaving Myrie Holdings. The second showed him meeting an elderly prosecutor. The third, her breath caught. It showed her walking home from work. Someone had been following her for months. The next photograph showed her buying groceries. Another showed her entering her apartment building. Another captured her sitting alone at her favorite café. She felt sick. Who took these? The same people who killed your father. She looked up sharply. You know who they are? Yes. Then tell me. I can't. Why not? Because if I say their names, they'll know you're still alive. The answer made no sense. She leaned forward. You've been helping me. You knew about the maintenance shaft. You knew they were coming. Who are you? This time, the driver answered. My name is Park Jin-woo. I worked with your father. Were you an accountant too? A bitter laugh escaped him. No, I was his bodyguard. She blinked. My father never had a bodyguard. He didn't know he had one. Silence filled the car. Park continued. Your father uncovered something much bigger than financial fraud. He found evidence connecting some of Korea's most powerful corporations to a criminal organization that had operated in secret for decades. He wanted to expose them, and they murdered him before he could. Soo-jin lowered her eyes. Tears finally rolled down her cheeks. I should have protected him. You couldn't have. I wasn't even there. No one could have stopped what happened. She clenched her fists. I don't want sympathy. I want names. Park's voice became unusually serious. If you truly want revenge, there's one name you'll have to face. She already knew what he was going to say. Kang Min-jae. Park nodded slowly, but not for the reason you think. Before she could ask what he meant, the sedan pulled to a stop in front of an old bookstore hidden in one of Seoul's quiet side streets. Its faded sign read, Moonlight Books. It looked abandoned. Park finally turned around to face her. His expression was grim. Everything you believed for the last 3 years is about to change. Part 5. The Truth That Changed Everything. Moonlight Books looked abandoned from the outside. Its faded wooden sign creaked gently in the wind, and dust coated the display windows. Anyone passing by would assume the business had closed years ago. Park Jin-woo unlocked the front door with an old brass key. As soon as Soo-jin stepped inside, she realized appearances had been deceiving. The bookstore was alive. Hidden behind towering shelves of aging novels and history books were computer monitors, surveillance screens, stacks of encrypted files, and maps pinned to the walls with colored strings connecting dozens of photographs. This wasn't a bookstore. It was a command center. Park closed the door behind them and walked toward an elderly woman sitting quietly at a wooden desk. She looked up over her reading glasses. So, she said softly, Han Day-6's daughter finally made it. Soo-jin stiffened. You knew my father? The woman smiled sadly. For more than 20 years. My name is Choi Eun-hee. I was the prosecutor assigned to investigate the organization your father uncovered. You were investigating Kong Min-jae? The woman slowly shook her head. No, the people hiding behind his name. Soo-jin frowned. I don't understand. Choi opened a thick file and spread several photographs across the table. The first showed Kong Min-jae entering a corporate meeting. The second showed him secretly meeting her father late at night. The third showed the two men shaking hands. Soo-jin's eyes widened. My father knew him? He trusted him. The room fell silent. No, that's impossible. My father's final note warned me never to trust Kong Min-jae. Choi nodded, and that's exactly why he wrote it. Confusion swept across Soo-jin's face. What do you mean? If your father had written, trust Kong Min-jae, anyone who found the note before you would have known where you were likely to run. He expected his enemies to search his apartment. He needed to protect both of you, so he did the opposite. Park stepped closer. Your father created a warning that only made sense after you learned the whole truth. Soo-jin slowly sat down. Everything she believed for the past 3 years suddenly felt unstable. My father wasn't hiding from Kong Min-jae. He was hiding Kong Min-jae from the people watching. Choi gave a small nod. Exactly. She reached into a locked drawer and removed another flash drive. This contains a complete investigation. The organization responsible for your father's murder used Kong Min-jae's reputation as the perfect disguise. Whenever they wanted someone eliminated, money moved through companies connected to his business empire. Whenever officials investigated, every trail pointed toward him. So the world blamed the feared billionaire, while the real architect remained invisible. Soo-jin's voice barely escaped her lips. Then who killed my father? Park placed one final photograph on the table. It showed the boardroom from the video she had watched years earlier. Only this time, every face had been identified. One face made her blood run cold. Chairman Lee Sung-ho, the founder of Myri Holdings, the man who had attended her father's funeral, the man who had embraced her and whispered, "Your father was an honest man. We'll never forget him." Her hands began to shake uncontrollably. It was him. Park nodded. He ordered your father's murder, and he wasn't acting alone. He led an alliance of executives, politicians, and financiers who have spent decades laundering money, eliminating witnesses, and manipulating entire industries. They call themselves the Circle. Soo-jin stared at the photograph until tears blurred her vision. For 3 years, she had chased the wrong enemy. Every sleepless night, every dangerous decision, every plan she made to destroy Kong Min-jae had been built on a lie. But why was Kong Min-jae searching for me? She asked. Choi smiled faintly. Because your father made him a promise. What promise? If anything happened to him, Kong Min-jae was to protect the only family he had left. Before Soo-jin could process those words, every monitor in the room suddenly flashed red. An alarm echoed through the bookstore. Park rushed to the surveillance screens. His face lost all color. They found us. Outside, black SUVs screeched to a halt. Armed men poured into the narrow street. From every direction. At the front of the convoy stood Chairman Lee Sung-ho. He looked directly toward the bookstore and smiled. Then he raised one hand. Burn it. The first Molotov cocktail crashed through the front window. Glass exploded across the floor. Flames roared to life. Park grabbed Soo-jin by the arm. We have to move. But before they could reach the hidden exit, the roar of powerful engines echoed from the opposite end of the street. A convoy of sleek black vehicles appeared through the smoke. Their doors opened in perfect unison. Men in black suits stepped out with disciplined precision. At their center, a tall man adjusted the cuffs of his charcoal suit and calmly walked toward the burning bookstore. Even through the flames, his presence silenced the street. Kong Min-jae had arrived. He looked straight at Soo-jin. For a brief moment, everything else disappeared. Then he spoke the words that would lead to the encounter she had spent 3 years planning. This time, I'm taking you somewhere they can never reach you. Part 6. You're coming home with me. The bookstore burned behind them. Flames climbed the shelves, swallowing decades of evidence in bright orange waves. Sirens echoed in the distance, but no one moved toward the fire. Chairman Lee's men stood on one side of the street. Kang Min-jae's convoy stood on the other. For a few tense seconds, the city seemed to stop breathing. Lee Sung-ho smiled. So, the rumors are true. You really did find her. Kang Min-jae never took his eyes off Soo-jin. I've been looking for her since the night her father died. Lee laughed. And yet she spent 3 years believing you were the murderer. Soo-jin lowered her eyes. Every plan she had made, every ounce of hatred she had carried, had been built on a lie. Lee slowly pulled a handgun from inside his coat. You should have left the past buried. Before he could raise it, one sharp crack shattered the silence. A bullet struck the weapon from his hand. Chaos erupted. Bodyguards rushed forward. Gunfire echoed across the narrow street as civilians fled for cover. Park Jin-woo pulled Soo-jin behind a concrete pillar. Stay down. Kang Min-jae's men moved with military precision, forcing Lee's attackers backward. Within minutes, the fight was over. Police sirens surrounded the block. This time, they weren't coming to protect powerful men. The evidence had already been copied to secure locations, along with testimony from surviving witnesses, had reached national investigators before the bookstore was attacked. The circle had finally lost control. Lee Sung-ho was arrested as he tried to escape through a nearby alley. One by one, the names from Project Raven were exposed. Executives, politicians, financial intermediaries. The empire built on fear collapsed under the weight of its own secrets. Weeks later, the news filled every television screen in Korea. The corruption network that had operated for decades was dismantled. Han Dae-sik was officially cleared of every false accusation. His death was recognized as a murder committed in the pursuit of justice. For Soo-jin, the announcement brought tears she had held back for 3 long years. She visited her father's grave carrying a single white lily. I'm sorry, she whispered. I blamed the wrong man. A gentle voice answered from behind her. Your father never blamed you. She turned. Kang Min-jae stood a respectful distance away, dressed in a simple black coat instead of one of his expensive suits. For the first time, he looked less like the man feared by an entire nation, and more like someone carrying his own regrets. He believed you'd find the truth, Kang said. He also believed you'd be stubborn enough to survive until you did. A small laugh escaped through her tears. That sounded like him. For a while, neither of them spoke. The wind moved softly through the cemetery. Finally, Soo-jin looked at him. So, why did you tell me I was coming home with you? A faint smile crossed his face. Because your father made me promise that if anything ever happened to him, I'd make sure you were never alone. She looked down at the fresh flowers resting on her father's grave. For years, she had searched for revenge. Instead, she found the truth. She discovered that courage wasn't fueled by hatred. It was sustained by love, loyalty, and the people willing to stand beside you when the world fell apart. As they walked away from the cemetery together, the morning sun finally broke through the clouds. For the first time in 3 years, Han Soo-jin wasn't walking toward revenge. She was walking toward a future her father had sacrificed everything to protect. And somewhere beyond the silence, it almost felt as though he was smiling. The end.